So, Star Wars has 11 movies. Some are bad, some are very good, but some have stapled themselves as some of the worst movies I've ever watched at the same time. So here is every single Star Wars movie ranked. And this is my list, so it can't be wrong. Leave a comment on what you think of this list, and like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. We're trying to hit 1K before the end of the summer, so if you want to join us on that journey, please be sure to do that. And we're live every day playing Hollow Knight, so with that said, let's just hop straight into number 11.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Do I need to say any more than The Rise of Skywalker? Oh boy, this movie is... I'd much rather listen to white noise on a 10-hour loop while I try to sleep than this. What the fuck is this movie even trying to do? We develop a basic principle in The Force Awakens. We don't follow the principle in The Last Jedi, and then we get to The Rise of Skywalker. All three of these movies feel like solo movies, but there's one that is better than the rest by a considerable margin, which we'll get to later. But this movie is terrible. Rey actually has to earn something in this movie. The dialogue is terrible. Rey having to earn something isn't a bad thing, by the way. This is a problem with the other films. Rey actually has to earn something, but her journey to earn this thing is not explored at all throughout the entire movie. The entire movie is really about Kylo, and Kylo doesn't really get that much character development to turn to the light in this movie as well. But it's still good. He's still one of the better characters in this trilogy. Finn gets tossed aside. Rose gets tossed aside after they were introduced in the last two movies. And yeah, it kind of just felt like its own movie. I really didn't enjoy it. They really did not do lightsabers justice in this one fight either, but hey ho, this movie exists. This is the worst movie.
Something.
You feel it?
Yes, I feel it.
That's the Force.
Really?
Wow.
And following suit at number 10 is The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker are two of arguably the worst movies I've ever watched in my life, with the expectation that they both have and hold as Star Wars movies. The Last Jedi is dim, it's slow. It isn't as bad as The Rise of Skywalker, because The Rise of Skywalker completely ruins Star Wars by adding Palpatine back, and it just ruins the Chosen One prophecy. But The Last Jedi does butcher Luke Skywalker at the same time, so they both do equally as bad things. But The Last Jedi as a movie, I think, is a bit worse. It's dim. There's not really any action. Most of the movie is basically just a game of cat and mouse of two ships flying away from each other. They go to a gambling planet for no reason. They leave the gambling planet with nothing like more than they went there for. Solo isn't a horror movie by the standards of the last two movies that we've just spoken about. I want to put it simply. This movie is night and day compared to Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi. But this movie still honks. Again, people be like, where's Attack of the Clones? Why is this not below? I just don't like Solo that much. I don't understand, like, you know, the whole premise that they went for the young Han story. I liked it. They made a really weird marketing choice by making us think Chewie was going to die in this movie, which just doesn't happen. The villain's really weak. She also happens to play a really weak villain in Marvel too. But yeah, oh my, don't even get me started on Beckett, bro. Beckett is a terrible mentor, terrible character. I despise him. Maybe you're supposed to despise him, I don't know. Solo for me is worse than Attack of the Clones. But just next on my list in the number 8 spot, this movie is also utter garbage, but it's still night and day compared to the bottom two on this list. This movie, while it is considered the worst prequel movie, is still levels better than any sequel movie. This movie has terrible dialogue, incredible Anakin Riz scenes.
I'm in charge of security here, milady.
Terrible dialogue, terrible romance scenes, terrible lightsaber choreography, except for one scene. Obi-Wan could have just listened to Dooku and the whole war would have been over. Terrible acting, and did I mention terrible romance scenes? Yeah, this movie kind of just sucks, but there's not really much more I can say other than that to it. This movie does have its positives, like Coleman Trebor, Glorious King, Jango Fett's in this movie as well. Slave One chase through the asteroid field is a great scene. Obi-Wan versus Jango. There's good scenes in this movie, but this movie doesn't shine for what it's supposed to be.
Who are you? I'm no one.
It's going to be The Force Awakens. Now, I think this movie jumps up quite a bit from the other four that have been listed on this list so far. I think The Force Awakens is an incredible groundwork for what could have came from Disney Star Wars. Kylo Ren is a very intimidating villain for the time that we get of him in the mask. And as soon as he takes it off, we just learn that he's... Adam Driver is like a gimpy child that's a bit edgy, and, you know, he kind of wants to kill his father. That's kind of Kylo Ren's character. Killing off Han Solo, I think, is a disgrace, even though, obviously, Harrison Ford wanted to leave Star Wars, so I'm not too bothered by it. But he was kind of not done much justice. Starkiller Base is just a blatant copy of the Death Star. I thought this was a bit lazy. I really thought, the whole super weapon to destroy a planet thing would have been over, but they went for it again. It kind of worked, it kind of didn't. Finn, the base of his character is established. It's so good, and they just toss him aside. Rey's introduced. She's not as bad in this movie, but she learns things very quickly that she just shouldn't. Like, she goes from not being able to shoot a blaster to being able to 1v1 Kylo Ren in a duel, who is an experienced Force user. So I don't even know at this point.
Yes, the negotiator.
Phantom Menace. Yeah, Phantom Menace is ridiculously high. It somehow managed to climb itself above Solo, Force Awakens, and then the other movies we just won't talk about because they're kind of just bad and they're kind of just garbage. But people will be surprised by those two movies, probably me not ranking them as high as. And I would be too. But this movie, for me, upon rewatch, is an average movie. It is a very average movie compared to the top 5, because the top 5 is another spike in quality. But it just beats out The Force Awakens because I think it follows principles and feels more like a Star Wars movie. Like, for examples, we get the first scene is great. Negotiations is an amazing scene. Duel of the Fates is incredible. I think the pod racing scene, in my opinion, is a really good scene in the movie. Qui-Gon's a great character. Padawan Obi-Wan's a great character. There's a lot of positives that this movie has that some of these movies in, between this are just lacking. But I do think this is a very interchangeable sort of 6th, 7th, and 8th, perhaps. I don't know. In my opinion, it could be. But I think this movie does take a big leap up and follows some more direct principles of Star Wars compared to the other movies that we've had. But Duel of the Fates just carries the shit out of this movie. John Williams did not need to go this hard on the score, but... And I'm not saying this is a great movie by any means. I really do just think this movie is a severely underrated Star Wars movie in a lot of ways. And boys, just before we get to the top 5, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the summer. I make Star Wars videos and I stream games. And I occasionally review movies as well. So if that sounds like a bit of you boys, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your pet otter, I don't know.
I'm one of them. The Force is with me. I'm one.
If you hadn't guessed already, the rest of the list that we've got remaining: New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Sith, and Rogue One. And I had to think. I had to do a lot of thinking. Put number 5 on this list, Rogue One. Because I think, look, Rogue One in itself is an amazing Star Wars movie. I watched this in the cinema. It had me feeling good. It had me feel like I was watching Star Wars on, The Force Awakens and Co. in the sequels. I think it just falls short of others on this list because I think the entire original trilogy is just such an amazing thing. And I'm not a nostalgia merchant for them because I wasn't born with them and I grew up watching the prequels. And 2 of them are ranked incredibly low on this list. So, well, one of them is. But for me, I really just think that this was a great movie. An incredibly good movie. Disney actually cooked with this one. Chirrut Imwe, Baze Malbus, Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, K2SO, even Saw Gerrera, the pilot guy, Galen Erso, Director Krennic, Vader's hallway scene. Everything shone in this movie. There were so many good things. The scenery, Jeddah, the science lab planet, the opening scene on the grassland planet, Scarif itself. Oh, it just had aura. The Rogue One has aura, and it will never be it will be topped because there's better movies. But Rogue One has aura as a modern Star Wars film, and I do think that is the best modern Star Wars film to date in the 2010s onwards.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
So coming in at number 4, and this is just to spin the wheel now at this point because these 3 movies for me are all great. And there's one for me that veers ahead of the rest by quite a long way, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows what that movie would be. But I'm putting Return of the Jedi at this. And Return of the Jedi is a personal favourite for me. I personally prefer it to A New Hope. But when you weigh it up, I think A New Hope just takes it a bit. I think A New Hope has that Star Wars aura. It has the cantina scene. I think the trench run is incredible. I think there's a lot of A New Hope that is missed out in Return of the Jedi. But Return of the Jedi has its fair share of iconic scenes as well, like Vader versus Luke, the skiff scene at the start of the movie. These movies felt like Star Wars, and Return of the Jedi feels like Star Wars, but it doesn't quite feel like Star Wars as much as the other 2 movies in the original trilogy. I feel like Luke downgrades himself in this movie somehow. I feel like, Luke goes from very strong and very natural with the Force in Empire Strikes Back to a bit weaker That might be just me, my opinion. That might not be lore accurate, but in the movie it seemed that way. The Ewoks I like personally. Apparently people had a problem with the Ewoks. I like the Ewoks. I liked Endor. This movie's great. This movie is not bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not quite as good as my number 3 spot. My number 3 spot on the podium, A New Hope. I don't really know what more I can say. A New Hope. There's 2 more movies on this list left. I don't think it's quite as good as either of them. I think both of these movies, when you weigh them up that are left, they both have very good lightsaber duels in them. I think they both have very good emotional conflict scenes. I think they both have incredible, plot twists in them. One of them's a bit more foreseen, but I think A New Hope just lacks this. But I think A New Hope feels a lot more like Star Wars than these other 2 movies, per se. But I think as a movie, this movie falls short of it. I think the cantina scene, I'll always say, is for me pinnacle of Star Wars. I think that's what Star Wars is and what Star Wars always will be. The showcase of aliens and stuff like this. I think that's incredible. But A New Hope will fall short just because I think there's parts in the movie that just aren't quite as fast paced as they could be. And that's why in my number 2 spot, if you know this channel well enough, you know what's number 1 and what always will be number 1 in my opinion in Star Wars. In my number 2 spot is The Empire Strikes Back. This is always going to be controversial that my favorite movie is what it is. Empire Strikes Back is incredible. I didn't grow up with it, so I'm not nostalgic for it. I Am Your Father wasn't as impactful for me because I saw Revenge of the Sith first. This movie is great. Bespin, the ending scene itself, Carbon Freezing Chamber, Dagobah, Hoth. There's just so much about this movie that's good. The Carbon Freezing Chamber duel is incredible. It's one of my favorite duels in all of Star Wars. In my list of Star Wars duels ranking, I put it very high on the list, and click there on top of the video if you want to see that. But honestly, this was an incredible movie. When I watched it for the first time, this movie has aura. But I think this movie for sure delivers in every aspect that the next movie does as well. And I think at the same time, I think both of these movies in my top 2 can for sure be number 1 on this list.
Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader.
And my number 1 is Revenge of the Sith. There's something about this movie. Maybe it's because it's the first Star Wars film I ever saw, because I just saw it on the TV one night. I didn't just watch the third movie because I wanted to. I do watch movies in chronological order, but there's something about this movie that's really special to me. The opening scene, in my opinion, one of the best in Star Wars. Then we get the Dooku versus Anakin and Obi-Wan fight. Incredible. Anakin's turned to the dark side. Okay, this movie happens over 4 days, but it's still good to see, and I think it's still pretty good. It's not as well built up as it could have been, but it's still incredible. Emotional conflict of Anakin. Palpatine and Windu. But I think one of the things that goes very unnoticed in this movie is the score in this scene of General Grievous. Oh my god, John Williams literally just... This gives me an erection every time I shouldn't say that. This scene, when he gets off a ship, bruh, he walks off the ramp of the ship, and John Williams really just decides to just crank it to the max. And honestly, this is one of the greatest movies I think ever made. And this could be like an over-exaggeration, but Revenge of the Sith has so much. It has some of the best lightsaber duels in the franchise. But yeah, I think Revenge of the Sith, personally, has the best of every single realm in Star Wars. I think it has the Star Wars aura about it. I think it has some of the best emotional scenes in the trilogy. In the saga, I don't think it has the best, but I think it has some of the best. I think it has the best battles. I think it has the best lightsaber duels. I think it does the best at planet building, because we go to quite a few in this movie. I think this movie is, in my opinion, the best Star Wars movie. Just because this movie is like plus 20k aura. And boys, that is every single Star Wars movie ranked. And in this video, I ranked every single lightsaber duel in Star Wars. So if you're interested, click there. Have a great rest of your day, boys.